The cake was a three-tier monstrosity with gold leaf on it, real gold leaf. My son-in-law's mother had flown in a pastry chef from Toronto for the occasion, and she made sure everyone in the room knew it. I sat at the end of the long table in the rented dining room of the Hartfield Country Club, just outside Oakville, and I watched my daughter laugh too loudly at her mother-in-law's jokes. She had on a pearl-colored silk dress that probably cost more than I made in a month at the library, and her hair was done in that severe, sleek style she'd started wearing after she married into the Pemberton Hayes family. I'd worn my navy cardigan over a plain blouse. I'd ironed it myself the night before in my little kitchen, listening to the kettle whistle and thinking about what I was going to write in the card. The party was for my son-in-law's 40th birthday. His name is Sutton Pemberton Hayes III, and yes, he says the third when he introduces himself, even at the grocery store. He's a litigation lawyer with a firm on Bay Street, and he commutes from the big stone house in Burlington that my daughter had spent the better part of 2 years renovating. I'd been to the house exactly 4 times in 6 years. I waited until after the speeches, after the gold-leafed cake, after the round of champagne that I sipped politely and didn't finish. When the gift-giving started, the table by the window was already groaning under the weight of expensive parcels and heavy paper, ribbons trailing onto the carpet. Sutton's mother had given him a set of cufflinks that, I overheard, were the same model his father had been wearing the day Sutton was born. The cousins gave him a numbered print by some painter from Quebec City. His business partner gave him a Swiss watch in a polished wooden box. I waited my turn. I had a small package wrapped in brown paper. I tied it with twine the way my own mother used to wrap things, because I liked how it looked. Inside was a leather-bound notebook, the kind I'd been buying from a little stationery shop on Locke Street in Hamilton for 30 years. Inside the front cover, I had written, in my best handwriting, a passage from a book Sutton had told me once, years ago when he was first courting my daughter, was his favorite. I'd remembered every word he said back then, when he was still nervous around me, when he still called me ma'am. I walked it over to him. I handed it to him with both hands. He smiled the way men smile when they're about to be polite about something. He unwrapped it carefully, held up the notebook, looked at the cover, opened it, read the inside page without reading it, if you know what I mean. The way your eyes skim over something you've already decided doesn't matter. My daughter leaned over his shoulder. She had a glass of champagne in her hand, and she was already halfway to laughing. "A notebook?" she said. "Mum, this isn't a grade 2 craft fair." A few people laughed. Politely at first, the way you laugh when you're not sure if a joke is meant or not. Then his mother laughed, a real laugh, and that gave everyone permission. The laughter rippled out and around the table and came back to me at the end of it. Sutton turned the notebook over in his hands like he was inspecting fruit. He smiled. He's got a very good smile, you have to give him that. It's the smile that gets him hired. "You know what, Mum?" he said, and the word "mum" out of his mouth always sounded like he was reading it off a teleprompter. "If you can't afford a real gift, just bring a Tim Hortons gift card next time. Honestly, we'd be just as happy." That got a bigger laugh. My daughter pressed her hand to her mouth. Her shoulders were shaking. Her mother-in-law dabbed at the corner of her eye with a linen napkin like Sutton had just delivered a wedding toast. I picked up my handbag. I picked up my coat from the back of the chair. I walked out of the dining room and across the marble lobby and past the bellhop who tipped his hat to me, and I got into my 11-year-old Toyota Corolla in the parking lot, and I drove home to my apartment in Stoney Creek without crying. Because I have not cried in front of anyone since 1987, and I was not going to start now. I drove with both hands on the wheel, and I thought about a great many things. I thought about my husband, gone 22 years now, and what he would have said if he'd been there. I thought about the long summers I'd spent reading to my daughter on the screened-in porch of our old house in Ancaster, the one we'd sold after he died, because I couldn't bear the silence of all those rooms. I thought about how she used to climb into my lap with a book in her hand and say, "Read it again, Mummy," even when she'd already heard it 12 times. And I thought about the leather-bound notebook on the table, abandoned, probably already pushed off to the side to make room for the cufflinks. The next Monday morning, I called the man who had been managing my affairs for the last 16 years. His name is Mr. Crozier, and his office is in a quiet building on King Street West in Hamilton, above a dental practice. I'd been working with him since my husband died, and before that with his father. I sat at my kitchen table with my tea, and I dialed the number. "Mr. Crozier," I said when he picked up. "It's me. I'd like you to start the process. All of it." There was a pause on the line. "He's a careful man, Mr. Prozik." "Crozier?" He doesn't say anything quickly. "All of it," he repeated. "All of it. The trust, the properties, the transfers we discussed last spring. Everything. Are you certain?" I looked out the kitchen window at the maple tree in the courtyard. Half its leaves had already turned. We were heading into a hard frost that week, the weatherman had said. "I've been certain for a long time," I said. "I was just waiting. Well, my daughter doesn't know what nobody in that dining room knew. Not Sutton, not his mother with her cufflinks, not the painter from Quebec City or anyone else. Is that I have not been a struggling widow on a librarian's pension for a single day of the last 31 years. My husband, God rest him, was a quiet man who came from nothing and built something. He started a small company in 1979 that made specialty parts for industrial cooling systems. He worked out of a unit in an industrial park in Burlington with 2 employees. By the time he died in the spring of 2003, the company had been bought twice, and he had walked away from the second sale with an amount of money that, even now, when I see the figure on a piece of paper, makes my mouth go a little dry. He had set up trusts. He had been advised carefully. He had spent the last 6 months of his life in a hospice bed with a yellow legal pad on his lap, writing letters to me about what to do with all of it. He told me one thing, near the end. He said, "Don't tell her yet. Don't tell our girl yet." He'd watched her in her last years of university, and he'd seen something he didn't like. He saw her drift toward a certain crowd, a certain set of expectations. She was a smart girl, our daughter, smart as a whip. But she had a tendency to measure herself against the wrong yardsticks. He said, "If we hand her this now, we'll lose her. Let her find her own legs. Let her earn what she earns. We can always tell her later." So I never told her. I kept the apartment we'd bought when we downsized to be closer to my husband's specialists, and after he died, I just stayed there. I worked part-time at the public library 3 afternoons a week because I liked it. I bought my groceries on sale. I drove a sensible car, and every quarter Mr. Crozier sent me a report I read in the kitchen with my tea, and every quarter the figure at the bottom of the page grew, the way it does when you don't touch any of it, and you have good people advising you. The current figure, by the way, is somewhere in the neighborhood of 41 million Canadian dollars. Most of it is in trust, in conservative investments, in commercial property in Hamilton and St. Catharines, and a small portfolio in Calgary that my husband's brother had recommended back in the 90s. My daughter believes I live on a librarian's pension and the Canada pension plan. She believes that the small checks I have occasionally slipped her over the years, for our grandson's hockey gear, for a school trip, for a winter coat the year she was first married and money was tight, came from my careful budgeting. She has thanked me politely for those checks in the past. She has not thanked me in some years. She also does not know, and Sutton certainly does not know, that the very firm Sutton joined 5 years ago as a junior partner sits in a building on Bay Street in Toronto that is owned by a numbered company. That numbered company is owned by a holding company. That holding company is part of the trust my husband set up. Sutton's name is on a lease. My signature, indirectly, is on the title. He has never once asked me what I do for a living, by the way. In 6 years of being married to my daughter, he has never asked me a single question about my own life. He has asked me to pass the butter. I sat at my kitchen table the morning after I called Mr. Crozier, and I made a list. I am a list maker. My husband used to laugh at me for it. He said I made lists for my lists. The first item on the list was my grandson. His name is Beckett, and he is 14 years old, and he is, in many ways, the only reason I had not done what I was about to do years ago. He plays goalie for a AAA team out of Burlington, and he comes to visit me, on his own, every second Sunday. He takes the GO train, even though his parents have offered to drive him, because he says he likes the ride. He brings me coffee from a Tim Hortons at the station. He eats the cookies I bake. He tells me about school and about a girl named Sadie he doesn't have the courage to talk to. He calls me Nan. When Beckett was 11, he asked me once if I was sad about Granddad. I told him yes, and I told him why. He sat on my couch with his sock feet up, and he listened to me for 40 minutes. And when I was done, he said, "I wish I'd met him, Nan. I think we would have liked each other." Then he asked if he could have a glass of milk. That boy is going to be all right. He is already all right. The second item on the list was the house. My daughter and Sutton live in a stone house in Burlington that they bought 4.5 years ago for $2.25 million. They put 20% down. Sutton talks about that house at every family event, the way some men talk about cars. He calls it the property, as in the property has gone up another $300,000 since we bought it. As in, we did the kitchen at the property over Christmas. What he does not know is that the mortgage on the property is not held by a traditional bank. When they were shopping for financing, Mr. Crozier had a quiet conversation with a colleague at a mortgage company in Hamilton, and an arrangement was made that the mortgage would be carried by a private fund. Sutton and my daughter were thrilled at the rate they were offered, which was below market and which they assumed reflected my son-in-law's excellent credit. The fund is mine. They have been paying their mortgage to me by a long and quiet route for 4.5 years. The house, in the legal sense most people understand, is owned by them. In the financial sense that actually matters, I hold the paper. The third item on the list was the firm. I'd had Mr. Crozier do some quiet looking into Sutton's firm about 2 years ago, not for any particular reason, just because I am a list maker and I like to know things. What had come back was interesting. The senior partners of the firm had been investing some of their personal capital and some of their clients' retainer money, which is the part that matters, in a Cayman-based vehicle that had been flagged twice by a regulator in Ontario. Nothing had been proven. Nothing had been charged. But the file was open. Mr. Crozier had a friend at the Law Society who said very quietly over coffee at a place on James Street North that it was only a matter of time. I had not done anything with that information. I had filed it away. I am not a woman who goes looking for trouble. But I am also not a woman who pretends a thing she knows is something she doesn't know. The fourth item on the list was my daughter herself, and I will be honest with you. I did not know what to do about that one. I wrote her name down and I underlined it twice and I left a blank space beside it on the page. That week, I did 3 things. First, I had Mr. Crozier draft a letter giving formal notice that the private mortgage on the Burlington property would be called in within 90 days. The terms allowed for it. Nobody had ever expected them to be invoked. The letter would go out the following Monday from a law office in Hamilton, on letterhead my daughter would not recognize. Second, I instructed Mr. Crozier to transfer a substantial trust set up in Beckett's name when he was born into an irrevocable vehicle that would mature on his 25th birthday. Until then, it would pay out small annual amounts for his education and for what the document poetically called personal development. The principal would be inaccessible to anyone, including his parents, especially his parents. Third, I made an appointment to have lunch with the woman at the Law Society my husband's old accountant used to know. Her name was Marguerite. She was retired now, and she still kept her ear to the ground. I met her at a tea room in Westdale. I asked her what she'd heard lately about Sutton's firm. She told me what she'd heard, which was a great deal. I thanked her. I paid for the tea. I left her a tin of shortbread I'd baked that morning. I did not need to do anything else about the firm. The Law Society was going to do it for me in its own slow Canadian way within the year. What I did do, 10 days after the birthday party, was drive up to Burlington and ring my daughter's doorbell on a Saturday morning. She opened the door in her workout clothes. She had a green smoothie in her hand, and she was wearing the kind of expression you wear when you've been caught in the middle of something. "Mum," she said, "I wasn't expecting you." "I know. Can I come in for a minute?" She let me in. The house smelled of an essential oil diffuser and of recently baked something. Beckett was at hockey practice. Sutton was at the office, even on a Saturday. We sat in the kitchen at the marble island that I'd been told last Christmas was honed Carrara from a quarry in Italy. She gave me a mug of coffee. "I came to talk to you about the party," I said. Her face changed. It went a little tight at the corners of the mouth. She had her father's mouth. She did not like to be reminded of things she'd done in front of an audience. "Mum, look," she said. Sutton was just joking. "You know he. I'm not here for an apology," I said. "I'm here because I'd like to ask you a question, and I'd like you to answer it honestly." She set her smoothie down. "All right," she said. "When did you start being ashamed of me?" She opened her mouth. She closed it. She opened it again. "Mum, I'm not angry, sweetheart. I'm asking you a question, because I've been your mother for 36 years, and somewhere in there, you stopped looking at me the way you used to look at me, and I'd like to know when that was, so I can think about it." She started to cry. I did not stop her. I did not reach across the island. I waited. She told me a great many things in the next 20 minutes, some of which I had suspected, some of which I had not. She told me she had been embarrassed at the party because Sutton's mother had been making little comments all afternoon about the brown paper of my parcel. She told me she had laughed because it had been easier to laugh than to defend me. She told me that Sutton had been distant for months, that he was drinking more, that he had been on calls behind the closed door of his study at odd hours of the night, that there was a credit card statement she had not been allowed to see. She told me that she did not know who she had become. I sat and I listened, and when she was done, I drank the last of my coffee, and I stood up and I put on my coat. "I'm going to do some things in the next few months," I said. "Some of them are going to be hard. I want you to know, before they happen, that they are not punishments. They are corrections. There's a difference. Your father used to say that all the time." She looked up at me with her face all wet. "Mom, what do you mean?" "You'll see," I said. I kissed the top of her head, which I had not done in a long time, and I let myself out. Things moved quickly after that. They tend to when the foundation is already cracked. The letter from the Hamilton law firm arrived at the Burlington house on a Tuesday. Sutton, I am told, threw it at the wall. The mortgage was being called. 90 days to refinance or vacate. He spent 2 days on the phone trying to find a bank that would touch them at the rate they needed, and he could not because their household debt to income, despite his salary, was an architectural marvel of leverage. The renovations had been done on credit lines. The cars were leased. The cottage they had bought in Muskoka the previous summer had been bought with a second mortgage on the Burlington house. There was no money. There had never been any money. There had only been the careful, ornate appearance of money. 2 weeks after the letter, the Law Society announced a formal investigation into 3 senior partners at Sutton's firm, including the one who had brought him in. The story was in the Globe and Mail on a Thursday. By Friday, Sutton had been placed on what the firm called administrative leave. By the following Wednesday, his name had been quietly removed from the website. I did not gloat. I want you to know that. I am not a woman who gloats. I sat in my kitchen with my tea and I read the news in the paper like everyone else. And I thought about my husband, and I thought about the long years he had worked to build something honest. And I thought about my son-in-law, who had built nothing and inherited the appearance of everything. And I felt no satisfaction at all. Only a great quiet, the way you feel when you finally finish a job that has been waiting for you for a long time. My daughter called me 3 weeks after the Law Society announcement. Her voice on the phone was a voice I had not heard in 15 years. "Mum," she said, "can I come over?" "Of course you can," I said. "I'll put the kettle on." She came that afternoon. She sat on my couch in my little apartment in Stoney Creek, the apartment she had visited maybe 4 times in 8 years, and she looked around it like she was seeing it for the first time. The bookshelves my husband had built, the framed photographs of her as a baby, the threadbare rug from my own mother's house in Trois-Rivières. She told me Sutton had moved into a hotel. She told me she had pulled Beckett out of his private school and put him in a public school in their catchment because she could not afford the tuition. She told me she had been looking at one-bedroom apartments she could afford on her salary as a part-time consultant. She told me she had been crying for 3 weeks. She told me, and this was the part I had been waiting for without knowing I had been waiting for it, that she had found the leather-bound notebook on the floor of Sutton's study under a pile of papers. She had picked it up. She had opened it. She had read the passage I'd written on the inside cover. It was from a book Sutton had told me years ago was his favorite. But the truth is, the passage was one I had loved long before he was ever in our lives. It was from a Canadian novel I had read in my 20s about a woman who learns very late what she has had all along. I had copied it out by hand because I had wanted Sutton, on his 40th birthday, to read something that meant something. I hissed. I had wanted him to understand the woman who had raised the woman he had married. She read it to me, out loud, sitting on my couch. When she was done, she put the notebook down on her lap. "Mom," she said, "what do I do now?" I sat down beside her. I took her hand. It had been a long time since I had held my daughter's hand. "You start over," I said. "Like everybody else. I don't know how. You'll learn. You're your father's girl. You'll learn." She cried for a while. I let her. When she was done, I made her a sandwich because she had not eaten all day. She ate it sitting at my little kitchen table, the same table I had been sitting at for 16 years, and she looked up at me and she said, "Mom, why didn't you ever tell me?" "Tell you what? Anything. About yourself." I thought about it. "You never asked," I said. She put her sandwich down. "I'm asking now." So I told her. I told her about her father and the company and the trusts and the money. I told her about the mortgage on her house. I told her about the firm and what I had known and what I had known and what I had not done. I told her about Mr. Crozier in his quiet office on King Street West. I told her about the figure on the quarterly report. She did not say anything for a long time. Then she said, "The notebook." Yes, on the inside cover. There was a number in pencil at the bottom of the page. I thought it was a typo. I smiled. "That was a phone number," I said. "Mr. Mester?" Crozier's direct line. I'd put it there in case Sutton was ever curious enough to call it. He never was. She started to laugh. It was a strange, wet laugh, but it was a real one. The first real one. The first real laugh I had heard out of her in I don't know how long. "Mum," she said. "Oh, Mum." I did not give her the house back. I want you to know that too. The 90 days ran out. The Burlington property was sold to a buyer who closed quickly, and the proceeds, after the mortgage was satisfied, were modest. My daughter and Beckett moved into a small townhouse in Dundas that I helped her find. I did not buy it for her. I co-signed the lease and I paid the first and last month's rent, and that was where my help ended for the time being. She got a full-time job. She had to. She had not held one in years, and the first few months were hard for her in a way that I think she had needed them to be hard. Beckett adjusted to the new school faster than she did, the way children do. Sutton's divorce papers came in the spring. He did not contest much. There was not much left to contest. The last I heard, he was working for a small firm in Mississauga in a position several rungs below where he had been. His mother, I am told, no longer holds the parties. Beckett still comes to visit me every second Sunday. He still takes the Joe train. He still brings me a coffee from the Tim Hortons at the station. He is 15 now. He has grown 4 inches. The girl named Sadie has become a girlfriend. He asked me, on his last visit, what had happened with his mom and dad. He said he understood the basics, but he wanted to know what I thought. I told him the truth, in the version a 15-year-old can hold. I told him his mother had lost her way for a while, the way people do, and that she had found her way back, and that his father had not been able to. I told him that none of it was his fault. I told him that he was a good boy and he was going to be a good man. He nodded. He drank his coffee. He looked at me for a long time. "Nan," he said. "Are you rich?" I laughed. I could not help it. "I'm comfortable, sweetheart." "That's not what I asked." I looked at him. He has my husband's eyes. He always has. "Yes," I said, "I am, and one day when you are 25, you will be too." but only if you have earned it by then. Do you understand what I mean by that?" He thought about it for a minute. He's thought about it for a minute. He's a thinker, that boy. "I think so," he said. "Good," I said. "Now eat your cookie. The notebook is still on my coffee table. My daughter gave it back to me. She said it belonged to me, that I should write in it. I have been a little. I do not know what I am writing yet. Maybe a letter to my husband. Maybe a letter to Beckett to be opened on his 25th birthday. Maybe just a record of a year in which a great many things finally happened that I had been waiting on for a long time. If you are listening to this and you are a woman of a certain age and you've spent a long time being measured by people who never bothered to look at you properly, I want to tell you something. The world will tell you that your worth is in the things you can show. The car, the house, the husband, the gift wrapped in heavy paper. But the things that matter cannot be wrapped at all. They are written by hand, in a small leather book, in your own quiet voice, over the course of a long and unremarkable life. And one day, when the right moment comes, and it will come, you will hand that book to the people who think they know who you are. And they will laugh, and you will pick up your handbag, and you will put on your coat, and you will walk out into the cold Canadian air, and you will drive yourself home. And then, very calmly, you will begin. I sat at my kitchen table last night with a fresh pot of tea, and I thought about how all of it had unfolded, the way a person does when the dust finally settles and the house goes quiet again. And I realized something that I think is worth saying out loud in case it helps somebody else who is sitting at her own kitchen table tonight, wondering what to do. Nothing that happened to my daughter or to Sutton was something I did to them. It was something they did to themselves over a long stretch of years in small daily decisions that nobody was paying close enough attention to. Sutton built a life on appearances because nobody had ever taught him that appearances are the cheapest building material there is. My daughter laughed at me at that party because she had been practicing laughing at me for years, in the small ways she'd stopped picking up the phone, in the school plays she didn't invite me to, in the Christmas mornings I spent alone in my apartment because the drive to Burlington was, apparently, just too much in the snow. The cause was already laid. I was only the effect that finally arrived. I think what I learned, watching it all play out, is that the three things that matter in a life are not the three things the world tells you matter. The world will tell you to chase money, status, and approval. But the things that actually hold a person up when the wind comes are character, the willingness to think clearly when it would be easier not to, and the plain stubborn refusal to give up on yourself or on the people you love, even when they have given you every reason to. I held on to my character by refusing to spend a single dollar I had not earned with my own two hands for 31 years, because my husband had asked me to, and because I believed he was right. I held on to my thinking by reading 3 books a month from the Hamilton Public Library, even when nobody asked me what I was reading and nobody cared. And I held on to my nerve, which is the part that took the most out of me, by waiting, just waiting, letting the right moment come instead of forcing it. Beckett is going to be all right, I think, because somebody made him sit on a GO train every second Sunday and pay for his own coffee with his own allowance and learn that love is something you show up for, not something you cash in on. My daughter is going to be all right in time because the worst thing that ever happened to her turned out to be the thing that gave her back to herself. If you take one thing from this story, take this. Build the life nobody can see. First, build the person you are when the lights are off and the cameras are gone and there is nobody at all in the room. Build her quietly, over years. And then, one day, when somebody laughs at the small wrapped parcel you have brought to the party, you will know exactly who you are, and you will not need to explain it to a single soul.